Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out for this event. We're so excited to have Dr. Ali Hill here to kind of share some of her thoughts today. I'm just going to give her a quick introduction and then she can kind of take it from there. I'm sure she has a lot of really interesting stuff in plan for us today. So over the past 2 decades, Dr. Ali has run nonprofit organizations and private businesses, as well as designed, written, and delivered curricula, workshops, and trainings in the private and public sectors. Currently, she is the managing partner of Sound Advice Consulting Services and the founder of Sound Advice Women. I think I'll leave it there. There's a lot more on her website with her bio, but I think that she'll be able to get into that as she starts. So without further ado, Dr. Ali Hill.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's super fun to be here. I'm class of 98, so last century. And actually, entrepreneurship at Tufts did not exist. The Derby Center, none of this stuff existed when I went to Tufts. So it's really cool to be back talking about things that have become a mainstay of my professional career, which didn't exist when I was where you're at. So really excited to be here. Thank you. For those of you who are on, if you can show me your face, that would be amazing. We're going to talk a little about emotional intelligence, and I take a lot of my cues from whether or not what I'm saying is landing. And I can't tell if it's landing if I can't read your face. So if you can't, I get it, but oh, thank you so much. If everybody can show me your beautiful jumbo smiles, that would be great, so that I don't go off on a tangent and think you're happy and really you're like, what's this chick doing? Because I can't see you. Awesome. Thank you. So I am assuming, although maybe I shouldn't, because there's an actress with the name Evan, that Evan is a man and Lucas is a man. If so, it's quite interesting that we've got a bunch of men here who are allies to women in entrepreneurship. First of all, thank you for that. You all have the privilege, right? Oh, Evan's on your camera. Okay, hi, Evan. Awesome, amazing. Well, thank you so much. So the way I thought that we'd start out tonight is giving you a super brief piece of my background, only because it is absolutely positively not any sort of a straight line if you happen to check me out, right? So I say that because if right now you are studying entrepreneurship in a formal way, wonderful. If you are becoming a subject matter expert in something that at some point you think you might want to start a business about, fabulous. There is no one way to be an entrepreneur. Nobody gets to claim the word entrepreneur. You don't have to be in a hockey stick growth environment, in a tech startup with venture capital on the horizon. You can absolutely be a person who recognizes that you have talent and passion and skill, and that you're not finding the best way to use all three inside something somebody else created. So I think that's really important, no matter what your major is, no matter what the majors are of people around you. That doesn't define whether or not you're going to end up being an entrepreneur or you're going to be interested in entrepreneurship. And I know as part of this incredible accelerator that you have, this internal accelerator, that you're looking for people who perhaps may not have considered entrepreneurship as their path quite yet. So remembering not to count somebody out because either their major seems antithetical to it, right? My best friend from Tufts is a major educational technologist. And she is a double jumbo with undergrad and master's in child development. Okay, so when she was there, she was not thinking she was going to be the CMO of a massive tech startup in ed tech and then go on to create another one and have another exit. So thinking about all the people that you know right now who are in majors who wonder, would that become an entrepreneurial human? Remember that it's not something that is defined by a single industry. I was a Spanish major, okay? So and my work is non-Spanish, although I speak Spanish all the time. Really important for you to remember that as you are allies and helping support people who may not be considering entrepreneurship. The other thing that I wanted to start with is, by show of hands, how many of you have either read about, heard about, or care about emotional intelligence? Show of hands. Awesome. Great. Emotional intelligence. Super. Thank you so much. This is really helpful. Can one of you give me your definition of emotional intelligence and why it's important to you? If you unmute, I'll assume you want to start talking. It can be just super chill. Who has a definition of emotional intelligence? You said it was important. You studied it, right? So why?
I guess emotional intelligence is important because it allows you to understand what someone's thinking in the moment, or how you can approach someone for a certain conversation. Perhaps maybe that conversation will turn into an argument, and you can understand why that became an argument.
Great, awesome. So it's helping you build relationships, right? More effective relationships. You brought in the idea of maybe having some empathy, which is huge. I'm going to talk about that for a little bit. And then if there is an argument or a misunderstanding, you're centering their humanity, right? When you're coming from an emotionally intelligent or EQ place. Great, thank you. Anybody else? Why does emotional intelligence matter?
It also matters for you to understand your own emotions, what causes them, what emotions you're giving off to society, how you can prevent them or spur them in both yourself and other persons.
Awesome. So moving towards this idea of authenticity, right? Knowing yourself well enough, recognizing how you're coming across. Something that I think is really important. In the English language, we confuse the word emotion and feelings, right? How are you feeling? What emotion are you having? And I wanted to just let you all know that emotions are a biological impulse that happen within a fraction of a second. So actually, you can't control your emotions. So when somebody says to you, control your emotion, I mean, if you want, you could be a smart ass. You could say, actually, I can't control my emotion. What I can control is the feeling I have about that emotion. It's really, really important for you when you're understanding emotional intelligence to not ask somebody to not have an emotion, right? To not emote. Really what you're saying is, this is an emotion you're having. What are you going to do about the feeling that that emotion evokes? And they're different. They are actually not synonyms. Okay, so when we're thinking about emotions and emotional intelligence, knowing that something is biological also helps you stop beating yourself up. Oh God, I wish that didn't make me angry. It made you angry. Okay, but what are you going to do about the feeling, right? Don't make yourself crazy that it made you angry. Certainly don't beat yourself up if it made you sad, right? Act that starting from that place of giving yourself the grace to understand that you're a human being, right? I love to say we're not just human doings, we're human beings, right? And so you're going to have that emotion. You can't stop it. So don't try. However, do think critically, and that's what EQ is, about the feeling that that emotion evokes and what you're going to do about it. Okay, so anybody else? Why is emotional intelligence important? Why do you think it's worth spending time right now with me? What does emotional intelligence offer you? Nobody else? All right, well, I'm going to tell you one other reason why I think emotional intelligence is important. So we have a lot of conversations right now about artificial intelligence, right? And about algorithms and bots. And if any of us who is looking at this through the lens of workforce development knows, especially with COVID, you've got a pandemic. People have not been able to work because they were ill. Companies are rapidly testing how to basically turn anything they possibly can into something that can be done by a bot instead of a human, right? So here's the thing about EQ. The only thing that we consistently do better than the bots is be human. They can't be human yet. So if the only thing that we can consistently do better than the bots is be human, then I think that we should sharpen our humanity skills. It's our ace in the hole. It's the thing that will keep us employed, is actually our humanity. So when you're thinking about emotional intelligence, you're thinking about is, Seth Godin. I don't know if we have any Seth Godin fans out there, but Seth Godin talks about emotional intelligence as being a human skill, right? Not a soft skill. This used to be, kind of in the old days, EQ was seen as a nice to have, right? Oh, it's wonderful if that person knows how to connect well with other people. Oh, what a bonus that they don't yell and scream. Ooh, when they are actually caring, it seems like something really special. Not anymore. If you do not have the human skills that are required. You will not actually be able to hire people who will stay on your team, potentially find somebody for your C-suite, connect with investors well enough for them to understand what your mission is. EQ is not a nice to have. And actually, Fast Company magazine did a study in 2005, and they found that 9 out of 10 CEOs who failed for a lack of emotional intelligence. Somewhere along the way, the reason they were not successful was because they didn't have a high enough EQ. And so I think that's really important for all of you who are entrepreneurs and aspiring to do bigger things. Understanding that your connections with other people are going to be the reason why you succeed. Your technology skill or your acumen in some other way is clearly going to be the nuts and bolts of your product or service, but the people are the ones who actually make it all happen. Has any of you come across a situation thus far where you felt like your EQ skills needed some sharpening? That you were flummoxed by a situation, didn't know how to handle it? Is anybody brave enough to share? Yeah, Ben, what happened?
Oh, there was somebody I was working with on a startup who was kind of not really carrying their weight and not doing the things they were supposed to.
Mhm.
And it was kind of challenging navigating that situation. And we ended up kind of like, parting ways and just like not really working on them. But it's possible that like there would have been a way to handle that would have been kind of more productive, and that could have saved the situation more than just breaking ties kind of.
Absolutely. So in a situation like that, where somebody is not holding their weight, one of the things I love to talk about when it comes to being an emotionally intelligent entrepreneur is leading with curiosity rather than judgment. Right. So think about that situation. You might want to be like, what is wrong with them? Instead, what if your first thought was, I know they were really passionate about this. I wonder if something's going on. How can I ask them if they're okay in a way that we can ultimately get to the fact that they're not holding their weight? But I'm not going to start with a judgment. I'm not going to start with a finger wag. I'm going to ask them, are they okay? Right? I'm going to lead with curiosity instead of judgment. And in that way, you can start with asking a question. So how many of you grew up hearing the golden rule, that was the best way to treat other people? Anybody hear the golden rule? Okay, so the golden rule, right? It's my favorite myth to debunk. Here's the thing about the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done unto you, right? Here's the really big problem with that. The golden rule assumes that you and the other person have shared interests, have shared needs, that somehow the thing you wanted is the thing they wanted. It's actually a complete and total mess when you think about emotional intelligence and empathy. You should be doing what they want, not what you would have wanted. So what I like to say is to lead with the platinum rule as an emotionally intelligent entrepreneur, not the golden rule. And the platinum rule is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. Okay, this is a total shift. It is not centering you in the narrative, it is centering them in the narrative. And here's the thing, and how this applies to what Ben was just talking about. When you center somebody in the narrative, you have to ask them questions. How are you going to know what they need unless you ask them? So when you get into the habit of saying, what do you need to be successful here? How are you feeling about how things are going? What can I do to help you be more successful? All of these questions, they sound very basic, right? This is not any sort of, I have a PhD and I know how to write research questions. These are none of those questions in terms of depth and complexity. However, they are the questions you need to be asking in order to best connect with other people, which are going to be at the forefront of a successful relationship, and which dovetails with the other aspects of tonight's talk. Because in addition to EQ, I know we were talking about supporting women in entrepreneurship. And if you have somebody whom you feel might be wanting to dip her toe in the waters and she's not, asking her, hey, what are you thinking about this? it seems like you lit up with an idea, but then we're holding back. Do you want to talk about it? What are you excited about? Is something making you nervous? What can I help you with? Do you need me to connect you with people? Have you ever done this before? Right? You're leading with what she needs, not, oh my gosh, you'll be amazing. I'm going to show you exactly how I did it and it'll be fabulous for you. How many people would do that? A lot of people would do that thinking that was the right way to help, right? They want to help. Oh, I did this. You should do this too. And there you go with that golden rule. That might not be what she needs. You got to live by that platinum rule. Ask her, what does she need to feel comfortable in that environment? Right? Ben and I had a whole long chat before I came here tonight about thinking about how to reach a hand out to communities inside Tufts, where there may be women who would be incredibly interested in entrepreneurship, but would never set foot in the Derby Center, would never think that that was the place she needed to be. I started with the story about my best friend who's a double jumbo coming out of Elliott Pearson, child development. She wouldn't have thought that either. Now she's a massive leader in ed tech. Right? So who are those people and how can you invite them in with what they need, not what you needed or what worked for you? Somebody else, give me an example. Did you run into an EQ situation? What happened? Or what might you do differently given what I just talked about with the golden rule versus the platinum rule? Any other brave souls want to share a situation they found themselves in that didn't work out or that they're in process with? And I could hopefully give you a little bit of sound advice. Haha, that's the name of my company, Sound Advice. Anybody else have any other thoughts or situations?
One thing is, and this is a general thing, was I think when we all got sent home a couple of years ago because of the pandemic, we were all extremely frustrated with professors and just how things were going with the remote learning. And while we were completely while our frustration in a lot of ways was completely justified, I think that, now being 2 years out of it, I think one thing that I realize is, the professors were not trained to conduct classes online, and most of them don't even know how to use a lot of the technologies and devices that were thrown at them at such a quick and rapid pace. So I think that in that case, questions we could have been asking is can I help in any way? What types of things would, I don't know, make this easier for you? Or even just being a little bit more patient and giving them a little bit more time to figure it out. Because I think that was stressful for everyone, but I don't think I would want to be a professor then.
That's a fabulous example. Absolutely, right? You, in this case, are the consumer, right? You have paid incredible sums of money. You would be rightfully concerned about your education, frustrated that things were so different. And to your point about being sent home, oh my goodness, right? You're going back home. That's a whole nother story in and of itself. I can't even imagine, right? And so you're visibly agitated. However, if you are walking through the world as an emotionally intelligent person, your first thought is going to be, I'm feeling angry because this is not the way I wanted it. And I wonder how it's affecting this other person. I'm going to ask them, how can I help you? Is there something you don't understand? What can any of us do to make this easier and better for all of us? Imagine if you started approaching situations. See, EQ and emotional intelligence is something that when you prioritize it, it becomes your outlook. It becomes the lens through which you view the world. It's not a put on. It's not like a hat. You don't take it on and off based on the situation. So I love the idea of thinking about the moments in your life right now where you feel that somebody is potentially not producing or not creating something that you had an expectation they would, or they could, or they should. How could you go back to them, leading with curiosity instead of judgment, thinking about an empathetic lens and saying, how can I help you? And it may not be that you know the answer, or how can I connect you to the person who can? I think, especially in entrepreneurship, leading in this way is going to ingratiate you with a number of people. And let me tell you, you never know whom you are going to need in your corner. right? At the moment, it may seem like a complete, a moment of altruism. And you never know where that altruism is going to come back to you, because they're going to help you when you need it, or they're going to recommend you, or they're going to say, I remember that person from school, and they were always so incredibly concerned about others. It's amazing to me that they've now created this business, and I would love to support them. Having that idea in your mind, that these moments where you are thinking of other people, even in the short run, where you can't see a way that there is any sort of symbiosis or any way to, quote, pay you back, that you do it anyway. And that changes your reputation. That changes the way people think and talk about you, think and talk about your products. They're the ones who will become your ambassadors and your advocates, not because you're paying them an affiliate fee, right? And not because they're on your payroll, but because they remembered the kind of human you were. And they always want to support a human whom they felt was a giver. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of emotional intelligence. So we've talked about relationships, right? We've talked about empathy. We've talked about moving from the golden rule to the platinum rule. We've talked a bit about authenticity. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. When you hear the term authenticity, it gets thrown around a lot these days. What does it make you think of? Where are you your most authentic? Anybody? Where are you your most authentic? What lights you up? Where do you feel like you are just in your zone of genius? Is it in your business? Is it in school? Is it with your friends? Is it with your family? Thinking about when you are in a situation that lights you up from the inside is really, really important. Why? Because you want to put yourself in those situations as often as you possibly can, right? Especially when you are going to be the face of something important. I like to call sales something a little bit different than sales, right? Sales often has a kind of slimy connotation. A lot of people are fearful of it, right? They worry that sales looks like trying to get somebody to do something they don't want to do. So I like to reframe sales in part of my EQ toolkit and say that sales is about a transference of enthusiasm. Think about how different that is. I am transferring enthusiasm all over the place about how important it is for women to consider entrepreneurship, for people to think about being emotionally intelligent. When I'm talking about these things, I'm not selling anything. And yes, I have an e-course. And yes, I'm an executive advisor. And yes, I have a speaking career. But I am being lit up from the inside when I talk about these things. And when that happens, I don't know, do we have any When Harry Met Sally fans out there? Anybody see that movie? It's a long time ago. Maybe you're too young. Okay, so there's a movie When Harry Met Sally. It was very famous at one point. They're in a diner. Harry says, women never fake orgasms. Sally says, oh yeah, proceeds in the middle of a deli to full on fake an orgasm, okay? It's a fabulous scene. Obviously it's a New York deli, everybody's staring. Rob Reiner, who is the director, his mother was an extra in the movie, but she ad-libs the best line of the whole movie. So the waitress comes over and says, ostensibly to take her order. It's like kind of in the background. And then the camera pans on her and she says, I'll have what she's having. Best line ever, okay? The reason I give you this whole backstory is because when you are transferring enthusiasm, you want people to say, I will have what she's having. I'm picking up what he's putting down. I need that energy in my life. That is when you start getting people who are interested in what you are doing. Whether you are trying to win a pitch contest, where you're trying to find investors, you're trying to find staff people, you're trying to find your beta testers. I don't care who it is. You need to find the place and space where you feel authentically awesome. And then you need to transfer enthusiasm all over the place, because that is going to be what gets people to buy into whatever it is that you are feeling is amazing. Does any of you have a role right now, show of hands, where you are responsible for transferring enthusiasm about anything? Yeah. So a bunch of you. Okay. Do you feel like you are good at it? Yeah, I'm getting some like maybe yes, maybe no. Well, anybody brave enough to tell me why you think you're mediocre at it? Or if you're good at it, tell me I'm the fucking bomb at this shit. Like, come on, this is what I mean. Are you good at it? Do you need help with it? If you need help, why do you think you're not doing it well? Let's have a little self-reflection here. What's going on? Yes.
I'm not sure if people have seen like the meme of the teacher putting on like their happy face before they go into the classroom. But I would say I'm actually decently good at it, because even when I'm not enthusiastic about it myself, like sure, the whole topic, yes, but like maybe on a certain day or a certain time, I would rather be in my bed or doing something else. I can still take that moment to like process it, put on that enthusiastic face, and then hopefully spread it to the person that I'm presenting to.
How do you get yourself out of the like, I wish I were in PJs right now with Netflix, into like, I'm rocking whatever it is you need to talk about?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a specific thing. One thing I'll get back to you on that, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does anybody else have a situation like, is it a mantra? Is it a song? Is it remembering why you're doing it in the first place? Like, what can get you to transfer enthusiasm really effectively? And you can define effective, if that's an actual sale of or good of a product, if it's getting somebody to buy in. How do you get there? How do you psych yourself up when there's so much else going on in our minds all the time? How are you awesome at connecting with somebody else around that? What are you doing?
Is it emotional intelligence?
How so?
Well, kind of talking about what you said earlier, you can understand what you like about the subject, what's getting you excited, or the topic, and then try and see what the other person needs from that, or how you can connect with them on that sort of term.
Interesting. So you're getting psyched up about talking to somebody about something you want or need from them, right? Reframing it maybe is like, I'm going to offer you something. I'm not selling you anything, right? You're thinking about their needs. To your point, you're using that EQ. You're saying, what do they need from this conversation? I'm going to psych myself up, because for some people, helping the person get their needs met is an excellent way to psych themselves up. For some people, it's, I need to get my needs met. That is how I'm going to psych myself up for this, right? And that's great too, because that's that whole authenticity, empathy. You can use whichever piece of the EQ toolkit, which tool works for you. There's no right or wrong answer here, which is really great. Some people are really motivated by getting to yes, right? I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's a great book. It's a negotiation book. It's called Getting the Yes. They really like the win of getting that person to be like, I'm in, right? That's what they like. And other people say, I really like feeling like I have made a connection with somebody that felt meaningful to me, regardless of if I got them to yes. So when you're approaching a moment where you need to transfer enthusiasm, think about how you're going to define success from that interaction. It's really important, because if your only metric for success is a sale, let's say, generic, but you're much more excited about the fact that you had the guts to stand up in front of that room, right? It doesn't matter to you one lick if none of them buys. But the fact that you got up in front of those 500 people and you tried, you felt successful at the end of the day. That's really important to know about yourself. That's a big part of EQ as well, knowing how you define success. Now, obviously, there are metrics, there are things you need to do in business, but I can tell you, if all the metrics you are using to define success don't resonate with you, you are going to burn out. You are never going to feel good about what you're doing, regardless of how many claps on the back you get or shout outs or whatever, if it's not meaningful to you. I'll give you an example from my own life. So a lot of people these days have membership models. Anybody have anything they're a member of right now that you pay monthly? Right? Okay, most of us do, okay? A lot of business models say it doesn't matter if people show up or participate, you've got their money, right? They're paying you monthly. So I built a community of women entrepreneurs and founders called Click Club, and it was all about coming together once a month. We were going to read a book, discuss the book, and discuss how that book impacts on our ability to be successful entrepreneurs. They weren't necessarily business books, okay? That was the cool special sauce of Click Club. They were books about women's lived experiences, because I believe that learning about people's lived experiences actually makes you better in business. Well, so this is what was happening. I gave everybody all of the dates for the whole year, a year in advance. Okay, I set the calendar, I sent out calendar invites. I even spoon fed it. They didn't even have to pay attention to their own emails or their own systems. Okay, they had the dates for the entire calendar year of 2021. And time and again, about a quarter of the women who had paid me the money were showing up to the live Zoom. Now, they were telling me they were reading it. They were telling me that they were enjoying the books or whatever. However, I realized at the end of this year that I didn't define success with how much money I made on them on the year, because they all paid me in full for the year. And I didn't define success as them saying, I really enjoyed that book. I felt most successful when they showed up to the live meeting. And when they didn't, I felt ignored. And so I realized that about myself, that if I wanted to create something, I had to be more explicit, right? They had the dates a year in advance. They were just not prioritizing it. And if I hadn't done some soul searching about, I was like, well, I made some good money. The women said they loved it. Why am I not feeling successful about this? And upon self-reflection, I realized it's because regardless of how they felt, they were reviewing the stuff after the fact, whatever. When only a quarter of them showed up to that live meeting, I felt like it didn't matter. So there's an example of I needed to really define for myself what success looked like. And so it's really important for all of you, as you're thinking about this, to say to yourself, what does success look like for me? That is a huge piece of being emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence is not just about how you are with other people, right? It's about how well you understand yourself, your own motivations, how you feel intrinsically motivated, right? And all of these things also go back to the larger topic today of thinking about women in entrepreneurship, right? Again, going to, most of you are not women. So I'm speaking, I know maybe one of you is, but in thinking about being an ally to the community, one or two of you are, I should say, thinking about how the women define success. What do they, and if you don't know, by the way, ask them, right? That goes back to the question before about asking. Talking to them about what they feel they want to do, what feels successful for them. I know that that's an important part of this community, is getting more people into it. And one of the ways you're going to do that is by asking people how they define success. And they may not have ever actually considered that. All of you are at Tufts, which means you are extraordinarily bright and you are very able students. You wouldn't be there if you weren't, okay? So using that as a baseline, how do you define success? It's not the grade somebody else gave you or you earned, right? We earn our grades. How are you defining success for yourself? Really important for you to know that as you venture into starting a business, because I'm telling you, you don't want to end up. So I read this great book. It's called Freedom is an Inside Job. And the woman, Zainab Salabi, who wrote it, she started Women for Women International. And what she wanted to do was help women and children in war-torn countries. But 20 years into it, what she realized she was doing was becoming a fundraiser. She was never working with one-on-one anymore women. She wasn't going to war-torn places. She wasn't helping them. She was raising money. And she said, I found myself with the crown on my head and the shackles around my feet, because she had created something that she ultimately didn't like doing. I never want that to happen to any one of you. I don't want you to have the CEO title, the crown on your head, and the shackles around your feet because you have created something you don't enjoy. Because you've created something that everybody else told you was a great idea, or that you felt with your skills was the natural next step. I want you to center yourself in the narrative of your business. Be self-reflective and figure out what feels good to you and how you define success. Because that is the only way to keep doing it. I promise you, I've been doing this a long time. You cannot stay excited. You will burn out. There are a million and one other things that will be jockeying for your attention if you don't feel good about what you are doing, if you're not transferring that enthusiasm all the time, if you're not feeling like this is where you want to be. Because if you're going to be less than excited, then why take all the risk that goes into being an entrepreneur? So I've done a lot of talking, and what questions do you have? Is there anybody who has a question? Anything? Ask me. I've been in the entrepreneurship business a long time, and we serve entrepreneurs. So we're entrepreneurs who work with entrepreneurs. So I'm doing a lot of stuff around this. What can I answer? How can I help? Yes, Ben.
So I'm working on a startup now, and I'm in a leadership role. And it occurred to me that the team is right now composed entirely of men.
Okay.
And like that wasn't through like intentionally like we're gonna go out and get men, but it was like we like post something like, hey, who's interested? And every single person who reached out was a man. And it's kind of it's definitely something that like my co-founder and I have like talked about as being like an issue that like needs to be addressed. So what tips or tricks or strategies or anything would you have for kind of dealing with that kind of a situation and like trying to get women involved in an organization?
Sure, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. So here's the thing, right? As you said, you put out some kind of a call to action, RFP, hey, who's interested, right? That is going to go to an audience that's already somewhat engaged around this, because that's who you are signaling to. So one of the things that I highly recommend is to, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, it's an old school phrase that like, what do you need? A personal invitation, right? It's like, yeah. When you want people who are not traditionally represented in something to come and be a part of it, you actually need to go to them rather than expecting that they're going to come to you, right? So if you were saying, I really want to make sure that our lead technologist on this project is a woman, I am going to go into the computer science department and either ask the professors or say, I am intentionally looking for somebody who is a woman. I'm looking for heterogeneity on the leadership team. So whatever category that is, I'm intentionally looking for somebody who's not a native English speaker, who is not born in the US, who is not Caucasian, who is not a traditional student. Maybe they came here after being, having a career or being in the military. I intentionally want people who are going to bring a heterogeneous perspective, whatever group it is they're sitting in, and then you go and find them. You don't expect that you can push out and then you will get inbounds what you want, right? You are going and saying to those communities, I'm intentionally asking if any of you is interested, because I believe that heterogeneous teams and groups, well, it's not I believe, it's factual, it's data-driven, make better decisions. And I am finding that when I fish in the same ponds I'm used to fishing in, I only get the same kind of fish. You can't just keep throwing your reel in, right? You've got to switch ponds. So being really intentional and asking people, not solely putting it out and expecting them to respond to your call to action. Anybody else? Questions, comments, thoughts?
Yeah.
Disagree with me. Come on.
One question that we actually got from someone else, but I have a little personal twist on it, is what experience has been most valuable to you in helping you develop emotional intelligence? Obviously, like you didn't come across this, like you didn't just like, you weren't born with this, right? With this realization that emotional intelligence is just so incredibly important for entrepreneurship and for the success of a business. So I think one question is, was there a particular experience that led you to develop it? And my personal twist on it is just, I'd love to hear how that experience for you, particularly as a woman, like how that affected you, particularly as a woman, because I think, I am the only girl on like Jumbo Ventures e-board right now, and we're definitely making efforts, but as someone who resonates a little bit with that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you have to say about that.
Sure, absolutely. So here's the cool thing. I always knew that relationships with other people mattered, right? To me, I'm an only child, right? I always joke, I never had an unconditional peer relationship. I didn't have a sibling. I couldn't smack somebody around or slam a door in their face and be like, oh, they'll love me tomorrow. If I was like that with my friends, I would have zero friends, right? And so as an only child, I was very focused on being a good friend, right? So I think for my life's experiences, I always understood at some level that I needed to be good to other people if they were going to be good to me, right? So parlaying that into how EQ kind of came into the forefront. Well, I was on the board of the Women's Center at Tufts. I was a women's studies minor, and my freshman year, we created, and then I was part of a team that went to freshman dorms and sororities talking about healthy and abusive relationships. We had two main things. It was healthy and abusive relationships and body image in the media. And I was already really primed to recognize that the way that other people perceived women mattered, and the way that women perceived themselves mattered, right? So I think for me, it was building upon a natural inclination that I already had, that relationships really mattered. But then I said, well, but how do you handle when people don't get along? And what do you do if you have an idea that is unpopular? And how do you show up as your full self when you're really afraid that if you let your freak flag fly, nobody's going to like you? So I had some instincts, and then I started exploring, well, what does this look like in action? Right? I understood that these were things that were part of being human, but I didn't know what to call it. And I didn't even know if it really mattered. Remember, as I told you at the top of the program, it used to be called soft skills. Who wants anything that's a soft skill? That seems totally like an add-on, an afterthought. And so for me, I started to seek out where, in what disciplines, does this thing I have an instinct about, being a good friend, where does it matter? And that's when I started finding research, finding, disciplines that said, oh, this is what it looks like to be in relationships with other people. Oh, this is what it looks like to self-reflect, right? And back then EQ wasn't the language, and there was no entrepreneurship center, right? So it was more like, is it sociology? Is it psychology? Where does this matter? International relations, right, was all about being able to IR was the biggest major when I was at Tufts. That's why people went to Tufts. I started out in IR, realized I hated like half the classes, and that's when I switched to Spanish. But, so it was all about this idea of cross-cultural communication. How were we, right? So there was always this buzz, this understanding that it mattered to get along with people at the most basic level for you to actually be able to move a project forward, right? So I think that for me, that's where EQ evolved from. I was the national spokesperson and head of our anti-violence initiative at the headquarters of the Girl Scouts. So I managed millions of federal dollars, earmarks, that's your dollars, your tax dollars, was what I was being given from the federal government through GSUSA to do anti-violence programming across the country. And I was working in crime prevention and gang prevention and internet safety, which is what we called it then, cyberbullying, right? And bullying and relational aggression. So another place where it was validated that getting along with other people mattered was because the federal government gave GSUSA millions of dollars for little old me in my 20s to manage and to give out all across the country. Okay, so again, I was being given this input that relationships mattered. And so I think that for me, it evolved over time that I had to find the language, that it wasn't something that was immediately visible, but it was something that everybody kept telling me mattered. And this is really important, it was something I was really fucking good at, okay? I was really good at making relationships, at making people feel safe, at caring about the fact that they felt respected. I knew that all of that was important. And so what I was looking for was something that could validate what I knew and what I was good at and what I enjoyed. So again, going back to, you don't want the crown on your head and the shackles around your ankles, finding the thing that you're good at. And I was really good at this. And so I sought out, I said, I know this has to be something that's bigger than me. And actually 6seconds.org, which I may have mentioned at the top, which is the premier emotional intelligence organization, they talk about emotional intelligence by definition is being smarter with emotions, not smarter about emotions. Plenty of people are all kinds of smart about them, but with them. And the 4 things that research shows happens when you have a higher EQ is that you are better at your relationships, that you have a higher quality of life, that you're more effective, and that you increase your own well-being. I think that those are pretty good things to have, right? So it's, again, going with your strengths. If you're good at something and it feels meaningful to you, figure out the larger ecosystem in which that's happening. Always centering your relationships. Organizations are about people, right? That's one of the things that people have forgotten. That's why I talked about the Fast Company survey. Centering people in your organization, right? I started my career as a fundraiser. And what I learned very long time ago is that people don't give to causes. They give to people they like. People first, causes second. That's how you raise a shit ton of money. It's not because you wrote the very best ask letter ever. It's because people connected with you, that whole transference of enthusiasm thing, right? So again, as women, a lot of the time, women are raised, for better or worse, to prioritize their friendships and their relationships and their romantic relationships. That can go off the rails big time. So there's the whole kind of, downside to putting so much into your relationships, you lose yourself. I'm not advocating that, certainly not. But as women, if you have been raised to prioritize relationships, see that as a huge asset. See that as an incredible tool in your toolkit, that you are good at connecting because you've been told your whole life it was a skill you needed to foster in order to be successful, right? And then using that to your advantage, right? So to Ben's point, where, you go to people and you say, who's really great at connecting with other people? Do you like talking about things that you're excited about? Are you great at idea generation? Are you excellent at facilitating? Do you bring out other people's genius? Then I want you on the board of this startup because we need somebody exactly like you. And you may be going to a discipline to find that where they have no concept of how to code, where they have maybe they have no business acumen. Maybe they have been totally in a humanities place. However, you recognize that their ability to connect with other people genuinely, authentically, and that they enjoy it and that they're good at it is going to be the ace in the hole for your leadership team. So I think that that's a really big part of this. It's finding the things that you enjoy, not doubting. No, I don't want to say not doubting. That's like 27 negatives in one sentence. Go with what you believe is valuable and important. Because I can tell you this as a sociologist. The odds are if something is important to you, it is important to a lot of other people, right? That's what sociology is. The idea that we as groups of humans have shared characteristics, right? Psychology is a little different. That's the whole everybody's individual. That's not my discipline. I come from a place where I have said to people, if you tell me your age, where you grew up, your religious background, the education level of your parents, the socioeconomics under which you grew up, and your gender and your race, I can probably tell you a whole lot more about your lived experience than you would like, right? Because each one of us wants to believe, oh, you could never peg me. No, it's just not true. There are these categories that we sit in that influence our lived experiences. Use the categories in which you sit as assets that you bring, shifting the narrative on what and who matters and saying, I have all of these assets and what I bring to the table is meaningful. And if I can't figure out yet exactly why, I'm going to go figure out this thing that's always been important to me, and I'm going to show why it matters. And then I'm going to show up in spaces and places that don't usually have people who are speaking the language I am, literally or figuratively. And I'm going to show them why it matters. And I think that that's what any of us who is sitting in a community where we are the minority, whatever that is, right? We have feminized spaces, right? Look at education. Look at early childhood education. When men apply for early education jobs, unfortunately, I have a client, she owns a preschool. The parents still get freaked out. Well, why does a grown man want to work with children? What? That still happens. So I'm saying when you are the minority in your ecosystem, I'm not talking about racial, ethnic, or socioeconomic or gender minority. I'm talking about when there are not a lot of people who look like you, whatever that means. You need to talk about what you bring in the way that you bring it, not trying to mimic the other people, because that's inauthentic and you can't do it for long before you burn out. So that's a very long answer to your question. I hope I answered it.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else with the last couple of minutes, a question, a comment?
Yeah, maybe a quick response. I know it changes person to person, business to business, entrepreneur to entrepreneur, but you said you all, or your company is entrepreneurs who work with entrepreneurs. What's a common blockage that you see that prevents an entrepreneurial venture or an entrepreneur themselves from like reaching their own idea of success? And then how do you go about breaking that blockage?
Awesome. Oh my gosh, I love this question. Thank you. Okay. So the thing that I see most is entrepreneurs believing that they have to do everything themselves, right? A serious lack of understanding how to successfully delegate and outsource. They get to a place, especially at the beginning, where they feel as if this is not something that they can let go of in any way. And they also feel it's not just a matter of control. It's a matter of them feeling like, well, how will I really understand every aspect of this if I am not touching every aspect of it? It's coming from a place of wanting to feel successful, right? And so this is one of the things that I say to them, okay? First of all, one of my favorite expressions for entrepreneurs of all time is do what you do best and outsource the rest. And I don't say this only because of the mental load. I say this because of the opportunity cost. Has anybody heard the phrase opportunity cost? Yeah, comes from economics, right? So the idea is if you can make, let me use numbers, if you can make $100 an hour, right? Whether that's your brain power, whether that's you actually doing the business of the business, and you're afraid to outsource your bookkeeping, but your bookkeeper might cost you $50 an hour, and they're going to do it faster. And you don't have to learn QuickBooks or Xero. The opportunity cost of you doing the work is extraordinarily high. So one of the ways that I get through to some of my entrepreneurs is we actually do an assessment. Well, how long will it take you to do your books? Or how dirty were your books and how much did your accountant charge you to fix them? Because your accountant's going to charge you $250 to fix your dirty books, right? I say this because we own a part of our business is we own a bookkeeping company. So I literally have this conversation every day. Okay, so they say, oh, well, yeah, my accountant's super expensive and he or she is pissed when my books are dirty. Like, yeah, they don't want to go into your QuickBooks, right? And yet it took me 9,000 hours and I didn't get to this thing that was really important. There's your opportunity cost, right? So one of the things that gets in the way, and for everyone it's different. For some of them, it's the books. For other of them, it's, I don't want to pay somebody to just figure out fonts and I'll just do my own website. God help us all, right? Or I can, just get some clip art. What do I need to invest in an artist to actually do drawing? Or I'll use one of those, easy peasy things for my logo, right? They devalue it at some level because it's not what they do, because they're thinking that anything other than being extraordinarily miserly is being a bad business person. You're spending too much money on all of these costs, right? So this is something every single one of them struggles with. But again, to your point, in their own way, based upon, like, I have a client who will spend hours in her templates because she's an artist. And she's like, it has to look pretty or else I'm going to freak out, right? Whereas other people would be like, oh my God, who cares about the template? What matters is the offer. Right. And she gets a little hung up on how to frame the offer, but hot damn, it looks gorgeous. Right. So everybody has that piece of it. So that is absolute. I talk about opportunity cost. I talk about what or actual cost, right? If you don't get the bookkeeper and then you try to have your accountant fix the dirty books, that's a great example. And I think there was a second part to your question, but I'm forgetting what it was. Did I answer it or was there a second part?
I think you answered it. Was what is a common blockage, and then how do you usually go about trying to address that?
Great. So that's what I do. And so far it seems to be extremely effective. Hitting them with the, do what you do best and outsource the rest. That tugs at their, I really don't want to do this, like organ, if you will. And then showing them the real loss. I'll give you another example. Okay, a really quick one because I know we're out of time. I have clients, I did a business intensive with them. It was 6 weeks. We met every Monday for 6 weeks for a half a day. And at first they were a little bit nervous about the cost of what it was going to cost them to work with me. And I said, well, you told me you're getting about 2 inbounds a day, right? That you're turning down because you don't know how to build out your workforce, right? And I said, okay, so let's say you close 50%. So you get 1 inbound a day that you close, right? And let's say that you charge each of those inbounds $2,000 a month, right? PR, lowest package, $2,000 to $3,000 a month, 6-month commitment. I said, so if you're saying that every single day you're going to close 1, so that's 5 a week, right? And they're all good, and those are going to sign, that you're going to sign one of them a day for a $3,000 package, and they're going to commit to 6 months. How much money are you losing every single day that you don't work with me? And that day they signed a very nice consultancy on the dotted line because they said, you are right. We were not thinking about what we're losing because we don't know what to do. We were worried about what it was going to cost. And let me tell you, we started working, they started having an infrastructure that they could actually capitalize on those inbounds rather than farming them out to partners or just telling them they were booked, which is the worst thing. Never do that. I will teach you how to build your workforce. Never do that. But it was only when I actually mapped out the math and showed them they were losing more than they were investing. And by the way, that's another little tip. When you create a proposal, never say pricing. Use the term investment at the bottom, right? This is not what it's costing them. This is what they are investing in themselves. The psychology of that's really important. So again, and that was how they signed on the dotted line. And then they actually signed a year-long commitment to work with me on top of that. And I think it all stemmed from, I could show them what they were losing rather than what they were losing in inbound leads and revenue versus what they were investing in to get to where they needed to be. Anybody else? Questions, concerns, thoughts? I know we're over time. I want to be respectful. It's 2 hours later for you. It's only 6:30 for me. You guys are probably like glazing over, or maybe not, but I would be at 8:30. Anybody else? No? Okay, so here's what I am going to offer you. I don't know if my contact information is in any of your materials. If you would like to reach out, please do find me on LinkedIn. I think you can search for Dr. Allie Hill, but I might be under Allison Trackman Hill. I have that in parentheses. Welcome to getting married and having a name and a life before you got married and not knowing which name to use. So do that. Find me. If you have questions, I'm always here. I'm really excited about your interest in EQ. about creating heterogeneous teams, integrating women into what you're doing at Tufts. I really and truly believe, I posted an article today on LinkedIn. In 2021, 1 million more entrepreneurs came on the scene, 1 million businesses from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. I think that's going to keep growing. I think entrepreneurship is the answer for all of us. I really do. And so if there's any way that I can help you or connect you to other people or resources, please do. I am an alumna of 3 universities, but Tufts is the one that has my heart. So I'd love to help in any way I can. You know, congratulations on being so incredibly engaged in entrepreneurship now. I can only imagine what I'd be doing if I had known all the stuff you guys are learning when I was an undergrad. Good luck. Stay the course, transfer that enthusiasm. Remember, if it feels good to you, that's what success looks like. Don't let anybody else define that for you. And please be in touch. I mean it. It would be really great to hear from you. Thank you.